From Ronda Rousey wiping the floor with Cat Zingano in just 14 seconds, to Khabib's brutal triangle choke against Justin Gaethje at UFC 254, here are some of the best submissions of all time. Now, you can't talk about submissions without mentioning Rousey's amazing takedown of Cat Zingano. Some of y'all might remember this epic submission win, even after all this time, and for good reason. Taking place at UFC 184, it was the perfect way for Ronda Rousey to showcase the sheer terror of her judo-inspired armbar. This vicious armbar of hers has allowed her to force quite a few opponents into submission over the course of her career. But nothing really matches the likes of her 2015 victory over Zingano. Here's how it all went down. Before the fight, Cat was pretty much undefeated in the MMA, having crushed Amanda Nunes and Miesha Tate in the build-up to this fight. For most folks, it felt like Ronda was in for a surprise. But Rousey, being as unpredictable as ever, hopped into the fight, ready to make history. She waited for the perfect opportunity to make her move, and all it took was one mistake from Cat, which ended up sealing her fate in this match. You see, she attempted a flying knee at Rousey, which Ronda was able to effortlessly reverse into a throw. With her crazy amount of skill and sharp moves, Rousey was able to lock in a picture-perfect armbar. As you'd expect, Zingano was pretty helpless, making her tap out just a couple of seconds later. It's kinda nuts how fast this fight began and ended. The entire match flew by in the blink of an eye. It literally only lasted for about 14 seconds, which is kinda nuts when you think about it. But hey, that's the price you pay for making the wrong move against Ronda Rousey. That said, there's one other UFC fighter who's known for exuding a killer amount of dominance while in the octagon, and that's Khabib Nurmagomedov. There aren't a lot of UFC fighters who can go toe-to-toe with this guy, and he showed just how capable he is of dishing out some serious damage in his fight against Conor McGregor at UFC 229. Khabib has a history of forcing his opponents to submit. I mean, just take his fights against Michael Johnson as examples. But nothing really beats the sheer greatness of the submission he forced from McGregor. That fight was definitely one for the history books. Not only was it between two of the UFC's biggest stars, but it had one of the highest pay-per-view buy rates the UFC had ever seen. So you just know Khabib had a lot of pressure going in. But he didn't let any of that get to him, and in the end, he delivered a satisfying neck crank, causing McGregor to submit. Now, I've got to say, as far as submissions go, this was about as basic as you can get. But it's still kinda mind-blowing to see the Notorious helpless on the ground with Nurmagomedov twisting his head. If that doesn't exude a crazy amount of dominance, I don't know what does. It's been a couple of years since that fateful fight, but it's still one that folks just can't erase from their minds. And hey, I can't really blame them. It's not every day you get to see such legends go head-to-head against one another, and then to have one emerge victorious with such an amazing submission. Now, no list of the best submissions in UFC history would be complete without talking about Demetrious Johnson's excellent armbar win over Ray Borg. This was Demetrious's final win in the UFC before he parted ways with the promotion and joined up with ONE Championship in 2019. But boy, was it a memorable fight to end things on, because for most folks, it's straight up one of the greatest submissions in MMA history. In a way, it's not exactly surprising to see why Johnson, with his impressive history of mixed martial arts, would be able to deliver such an amazing armbar submission. In fact, the American has had a number of great finishes inside the cage over the course of his career, but the damage he dealt to Ray Borg at UFC 216 is still unmatched. Over the course of the fight, Johnson continued to work his way across Borg, tiring him out and waiting for the right moment. To some viewers, it felt like the bout would end up going the distance. But just as Ray let his guard down, Demetrious demonstrated why he is not the type of guy you want to mess with in the cage. You see, Johnson took Borg's back and lifted him right up into the air. He then transitioned from suplex to armbar, landing right on the canvas. It was a sight to see, that's for sure. Armbar submissions can't really get any better than this, folks. It's definitely one of the best, if not the best, that fans have gotten the chance to see in the UFC. While I'm on the subject of submissions that are downright amazing, I've got to mention the submission Charles Oliveira dealt to Dustin Poirier at UFC 269. In a way, this fight pretty much sums up Oliveira's journey as an underdog. He felt like the less popular fighter going into this bout. which isn't exactly a surprise. I mean, when you've got Poirier on the other side, folks are bound to be skeptical about your chances. But that's when Charles showed that he's not the kind of guy you should underestimate. Even though most of the MMA world was treating Poirier's title reign as an inevitability, Oliveira swooped in and made history with his amazing submission in this bout. It all started with the first round, which was fought pretty fiercely by both of the fighters. It involved some pretty intense striking rounds, some of the highest paced you'll see in the MMA. Poirier tried to tire Oliveira out with some of his classic southpaw counters. But as soon as the second round started, Charles fired back, gaining some serious dominance and momentum. In the end, Charles submitted Dustin via a backpack RNC in the third round. The fight really surprised fans and showed everyone that Charles is one fighter to keep an eye on. Not only is the dude hugely likable, but he's got the submission skills to back him up. That said, as good as Charles is at forcing submissions from his opponents, let's not forget the time Islam Makhachev left him absolutely helpless at UFC 280. On that night in Abu Dhabi, only one name was on everyone's mind: Makhachev. And I mean, I totally get it, because folks had just witnessed the guy straight up dropping and forcing the former champion, Charles Oliveira, to submit. Islam claimed the vacant 155-pound title as a result of the victory and quickly became the crowd favorite. People were really hyping him up, and for good reason. Just the way he entered the octagon showed that this was a man who was oozing with confidence. It didn't help that the crowd was certainly not a fan of Charles that night, raining down boos over him. Maybe all this pressure got to him because Islam was the first one to connect, launching a big left hand and firmly setting Charles on the back pedal. It wasn't long before Makhachev hip-tossed Charles to the canvas right in front of his corner. Before you knew it, the round had ended, with Islam sitting on top of a helpless, bloody Oliveira. The second round wasn't much different, with Islam dropping Charles with a punch, which led to an arm triangle choke and a quick tap to seal the deal. Finally, there's one other submission that's just gotta make this list. And it's Khabib's brutal submission against Justin Gaethje with a triangle choke at UFC 254. Khabib's performance in this bout was nothing short of masterful. Justin did manage to land a couple of big punches on Khabib during the first round, but that was clearly not enough to deter the champ. Gaethje avoided a trip down to the canvas at first, but in the end, Nurmagomedov delivered a completely awe-inspiring takedown late in the frame, threatening him with an armbar. What little success Justin might have initially had was quickly erased with Khabib's killer performance. And in the end, that submission was just the cherry on top of an amazing fight. It's definitely one of the best submissions we've ever seen in the UFC. Khabib climbed into the mount and transitioned to a triangle choke from the top. He then clinched it, rolling on his back. The ref missed Gaethje's tap, and because of that, the dude went unconscious. Some folks still can't understand how the ref managed to miss Justin tapping out to this day. Honestly, it's kinda hard to rewatch the fight without feeling the sheer amount of pain Justin might have been in, thanks to that brutal triangle choke. But hey, that's the kind of stuff you can expect when you're in the cage with Khabib. In any case, from Khabib's brutal triangle choke against Justin Gaethje at UFC 254, to Ronda Rousey wiping the floor with Cat Zingano in just 14 seconds, those were some of the best submissions of all time.